You're just a widow. My brother-in-law sneered across the polished mahogany table. This is family business. And just like that, they erased 20 years of my marriage as if I'd been nothing more than a placeholder in their perfect little dynasty. My name is Elena Rivera, and I was married to Thomas Rivera for 20 years, until he passed suddenly from a heart attack 6 months ago. No long illness, no warning, just silence where there used to be laughter. One moment he was reaching for the coffee mug, and the next he was gone. Grief doesn't follow rules. It doesn't sit neatly in a box or respect your schedule. It unravels you when you least expect it, like when you're reaching for a towel and realize it still smells like him, or when you wake up at 3 a.m. and reach for a hand that isn't there. But I survived. I got up. I paid the bills. I handled everything with quiet resolve, even while his family, his blood, pretended I was just some footnote in the Rivera legacy. They didn't call me, didn't come to the house, and certainly didn't help me organize the funeral. Not that I was surprised. From the beginning, they never wanted me. Not his mother, not his brother Dominic, not even his sister Renee. I was a teacher's daughter, a librarian by trade, a woman who loved books more than designer shoes. In their eyes, I was plain, temporary, unworthy of the Rivera name and fortune. But Tom, he loved me with a kind of loyalty they never understood. We built a life together. A quiet one, maybe, but real, honest. He didn't care that I didn't come from money. He used to say, "They have wealth, Lena, but you have worth." That was the man they buried. And now, 6 months later, I was sitting across from them in the Rivera family law office, waiting for the reading of his will. It was supposed to be straightforward. At least, that's what they told me when I arrived, late by 5 minutes after getting stuck in traffic. Dominic had glanced at his Rolex dramatically when I walked in. "You're just a widow," he said flatly. "We can handle this." I smiled, tight-lipped, and sat anyway. There were 5 of us in the room: Dominic and Renee, Tom's mother Gloria, the family lawyer Mr. Hargrove, and me. The air was thick with tension and lavender from Gloria's overwhelming perfume. Mr. Hargrove adjusted his glasses and opened the folder. As per Thomas Rivera's last revised will. Dominic leaned back in his chair, already smug. I could see it written all over his face. "She'll get a consolation check. The rest, ours." But then Mr. Hargrove stopped reading. He looked up at me, almost gently, and then said, "Elena, there's a separate document addressed solely to you." He left specific instructions that it be handed over before the full reading. He reached under the desk and pulled out a sealed manila folder. My name was written across it in Tom's handwriting. I froze. I didn't care about money. I wasn't here for drama. But something about that folder, his familiar scrawl, the care with which it was sealed, made my heart ache. I took it slowly. My hands were trembling. As I opened it, I heard Gloria sigh. This is ridiculous. She was barely in his life by the end. But she stopped. They all did. Because inside the folder wasn't just a letter, it was documentation. Official, notarized documents that outlined everything. Tom had left me everything. The house, the vacation property in Santa Barbara, the shares in Rivera Enterprises, the investment accounts, the vintage car he refused to let anyone touch, everything. And at the bottom of the page, one line written in his uneven handwriting, because she was the only one who ever loved me without asking what I could give her. I looked up slowly. Dominic's smirk was gone. Gloria's jaw had dropped. Renee looked like she'd been slapped. And in that moment I realized I wasn't just a widow. I was his wife, and he'd made damn sure no one would forget it. The silence after I finished reading that line from Tom's will was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was the kind of silence that hums, sharp, violent, full of teeth. For once, not a single Rivera had something clever to say. Mr. Hargrove cleared his throat. As outlined here, he continued as if the room hadn't just turned to ice, Thomas Rivera legally designated Elena Rivera as the sole beneficiary of his estate. All real estate, assets, financial holdings, intellectual property, and company shares are to be transferred to her name, effective immediately. He didn't look at them when he said it. He looked at me, and I saw it in his expression. He knew this wouldn't go down quietly. Dominic was the first to speak. "This must be a mistake," he barked, pushing up from his chair so quickly it scraped across the polished floor. "There's no way Tom left her everything. She's not family. We are." I folded the documents neatly and set them in my lap. My hands had stopped shaking. "I was his wife for 20 years, I said calmly. "I think that qualifies as family." Gloria scoffed. "Don't act like you earned it. You married up and got lucky. That doesn't entitle you to everything he built." I looked at her then, really looked. Her pearls, her perfect manicure, her pinched face that never once softened toward me, not even when I was caring for Tom during his last days. "You mean the business his grandfather built?" I asked, voice steady. "That Tom took from the red and made profitable again after Dominic lost that investor lawsuit in '09? Dominic stiffened. "Oh, you didn't think I knew that?" I went on. "Tom told me everything, because unlike you, I didn't have to earn his trust. I already had it." Renee, usually the peacemaker, tried to regain control. "Let's not turn this into a spectacle. There must be some legal way to—" "To what?" I said, meeting her eyes. "Overturn a legally notarized will written by a man who knew exactly what he was doing?" "Go ahead. Try. But I'm guessing Tom made sure every signature, witness, and timestamp was solid. He was thorough, always was." Mr. Hargrove nodded slightly. "It's airtight." They hated that word. Airtight. It meant no loopholes, no tricks, no second chances to steal from the woman they'd dismissed, ridiculed, and ignored. For the next 30 minutes, the room was nothing but sputtered accusations and empty threats. Dominic called his lawyer from the hallway. Gloria whispered into her phone, demanding a second opinion. Renee just sat there, pale, lips pressed together so tightly they were nearly white. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. By the time I walked out of that conference room, the documents in my hand and their stares burning into my back, I knew I wasn't walking out with just wealth. I was walking out with validation. The next few days were chaos. I had meetings with Mr. Hargrove's office, financial advisors, and the legal transition team for Rivera Enterprises. Apparently, Tom had even prepared a video statement, recorded 3 weeks before he died. He looked tired in the video, older, eyes a little glassy, but his voice was strong. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. And if they're around you right now, Elena, I'm sorry, I know how they'll make you feel, but I meant every word, every asset, every dime, it's yours. Because you never once asked me to be more than a man, and somehow you made me feel like more anyway." I cried when I watched it, alone in our old bedroom, his side of the closet still untouched. But they weren't the same tears I'd cried for months. These were different. These were cleaning tears. Tears that washed away years of being looked down on. Years of being treated like a guest in the family I'd built a life with. Years of being told I was less. And while I mourned him, while I missed the man who had been my heart, I also knew. Tom had given me one final gift. He'd left me the power to stand on my own. And now it was time to decide what I was going to do with it. The next morning, I walked into Rivera Enterprises not as Tom's wife or the grieving widow, but as its majority shareholder. I'd been here a handful of times before, mostly at Tom's side during company events or quiet Saturday visits to bring him lunch. Back then, people barely looked at me, smiled politely, nodded, and went back to whatever they were doing. But this time, the receptionist stood as I approached. "Mrs. Rivera," she said softly, eyes wide, "they're expecting you upstairs." The elevator ride felt surreal. Everything was the same. The glass, the quiet hum of fluorescent lights, the scent of fresh floor polish. But I wasn't the same. Not anymore. When the elevator doors opened to the executive floor, I was met by a tall man in a navy suit. He introduced himself as Andrew Ellis, the acting CEO. Tom had appointed to manage daily operations while he was sick. We'd spoken only briefly in the past, but he greeted me now with quiet deference. "Mrs. Rivera," he said, "first let me say, we were all so sorry to lose Tom. He was a great leader. We've been holding things together, but, truthfully, it hasn't been easy without him." He gestured for me to follow him into the main boardroom. 12 people sat around the table, department heads, a few senior advisors, and 3 members of the board. When I entered, they all stood. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Andrew turned toward them. As most of you now know, Mrs. Rivera is the sole beneficiary of Thomas Rivera's estate, which includes full control of the company's shares. She's not here today as a guest. She's here as our new majority owner. A murmur passed through the room. I could see it in their eyes, some of them curious, others skeptical, a few visibly uneasy, but none of them looked smug. None of them smirked like Dominic had. I took a breath and stepped forward. I know what some of you are thinking, I said, that I'm just the widow, that I don't have a business degree or a resume that matches yours. And that's true. But I spent 20 years beside Tom. I saw this company rise, fall, and rise again. I know its values. I know how he made decisions. And I know what he expected of the people who work here. I met their eyes one by one. He trusted me with everything, so if you respected him, if you believed in what he built, then I ask for your cooperation, not because I demand it, but because he chose this, and I intend to honor that choice. Silence again, then Andrew nodded. That's all we needed to hear. One by one, others followed. A quiet, welcome aboard here, a firm handshake there. It wasn't immediate respect, but it was a beginning. When I returned home that night, the house felt different too. Not empty, just quieter. A space waiting for something new. I poured myself a glass of wine and opened Tom's notebook, one of the leather-bound ones he used to keep by the bed. I hadn't touched it since he passed. Inside were pages of sketches, scribbled ideas, plans for expanding Rivera Enterprises into new territories, eco-sustainable tech, community-funded scholarships, housing development projects in underserved towns. Things he never got to finish. But I could. And that was when I decided I wasn't going to sell the company. I wasn't going to sit back and let someone else take the reins. Tom trusted me with a legacy, and I would honor that with action. The next day, I called a meeting with the board to propose a new project, one Tom had written about months before he died, the Rivera Initiative, a foundation in his name that would funnel 10% of the company's annual profits into education and local outreach. They were surprised, hesitant at first, but then I showed them the notebook, his plans, his handwriting, his vision. By the end of the hour, the vote was unanimous. And as I walked out of that room, it hit me. Not just the gravity of what I'd done, but the irony. The woman they once pitied was now the woman building their future. I knew it wouldn't be over. Not with Gloria still calling herself the Rivera matriarch. Not with Dominic nursing his bruised ego, and certainly not with Renee lurking behind silence like a vulture circling a wound. The Rivera family had money, but more than that, they had pride. And I had embarrassed them. Publicly, legally, permanently. It started with the small things. Calls I didn't return, emails left unread. Gloria sent a curt message asking for clarification on her monthly allowance from Tom's trust. Renee forwarded me a 10-page proposal for a boutique clothing line she wanted funded in Tom's memory. Dominic? He didn't bother with pretense. He sent a formal demand for a re-review of the will through a lawyer who clearly didn't read it. I ignored them all. For the first time in my life, I wasn't playing the quiet, polite role. I wasn't making room at the table for people who had never saved me a seat. Tom had given me that power, and I wasn't about to hand it back. But they didn't stop. One morning, I opened my front door to find a journalist waiting on the porch. "Elena Rivera?" she asked, polite but direct. "Would you like to comment on the allegations that you manipulated your husband in his final days to change the will?" I froze. "I'm sorry, what allegations?" She shifted uncomfortably. "Well, Dominic Rivera claims that you isolated your husband, cut off communication with the family, and convinced him to rewrite his estate plan while he was heavily medicated. He's filed a petition to challenge the will's validity." I blinked, stunned, but only for a second. "Get off my porch," I said calmly. "Now." She left, and I called my attorney immediately. Mr. Hargrove wasn't surprised. "They've been digging," he said, sighing, "hiring private investigators, trying to unearth anything they can twist into coercion. But Elena, your husband's mental competency was confirmed by 2 doctors before he signed the final version. He filmed a deposition. He left video instructions. They're grasping at straws." I felt sick anyway. Not because they had a case. They didn't. but because it meant they were willing to drag his name through the mud just to punish me. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal prep, PR shielding, and media management. I had to hold meetings while worrying about headlines. I had to walk into a boardroom and pretend I wasn't being hunted. But what they didn't realize was, grief had already carved out the worst pain I'd ever known. I had already survived the unimaginable. They couldn't scare me, not anymore. A week later, we were back in a legal office, another room with another long table, another round of Rivera family theatrics. Dominic sat with his new lawyer, smug again. Gloria was in pearls and fake tears. Renee looked away when I met her eyes. The judge reviewed the petition quietly. After 20 minutes, she spoke. There is no evidence of coercion. The medical records confirm the decedent was of sound mind. The estate plan is valid. This court will not hear any further attempts to challenge its terms unless new and substantial evidence is presented. Dominic stood up so fast his chair tipped over. This is a damn conspiracy. The judge didn't flinch. Sir, if you speak again without being asked, I will fine you for contempt. And just like that, the gavel came down. The Rivera family had lost, again. As I gathered my things, Gloria hissed, "You'll ruin everything Tom built." I paused at the door. "No," I said. "I'll finish what he started. You're just angry he didn't trust you to do it." Then I walked out, not as the widow, not as the villain in their twisted little story, but as the only one left standing, the one who had loved him fully, fiercely, and without conditions. I didn't win just the estate. I won freedom. It's a strange thing, winning, especially when it's something as massive as control over a family empire that never wanted you. People think there's confetti, applause, closure, but what I felt was silence. The kind that settles in your bones. Not sadness exactly, but a sense that everything in your life has shifted just enough to feel unfamiliar. I sat in Tom's old office that night, alone. The city lights glowed behind me, and his leather chair creaked faintly as I leaned back and stared at the portraits on the wall. Generations of Riveras, men in suits, sharp jaws, cold eyes, not one woman among them. Until now. I looked at the photo of Tom, his formal headshot for the company website. I whispered, "You really did this, didn't you?" And for the first time in months, I felt his presence not as loss, but as protection, as purpose. Still, purpose has weight, heavy weight. Within weeks, I had to make decisions Tom had been postponing for years. A bloated marketing contract that wasn't delivering. An entire real estate deal in Phoenix that turned out to be a money pit. A senior executive siphoning funds through fake vendor invoices. I fired him myself. People watched me closely, waiting for me to slip, to prove I wasn't capable. Some of them were vocal about it. One board member even muttered under his breath in a budget review meeting, "She's just playing CEO. Eventually she'll fold." I heard it, and I didn't fold. I called a second meeting, no assistants, no distractions, just me, a whiteboard, and every single department head. "I know you're scared," I told them. "You think I'm going to burn the place down or gut it to make a point. I'm not. But I won't let this company run on autopilot while people like Tom, people with vision, get pushed out or ignored." I pointed to the whiteboard and laid out my plan. Cut losses in underperforming regions, reroute funding into tech innovation and community outreach, rebuild public trust with transparency, starting with quarterly impact reports and anonymous internal feedback channels. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. By the end of that week, 3 longtime staffers emailed me privately to say thank you. That was more than I ever got from the family. And then came the gala. It was an annual Rivera tradition, a fundraiser masquerading as a high society event. The last time I'd attended, I was in the shadows, wearing a borrowed gown, pouring Tom's drink while Gloria paraded Dominic around like the heir to a throne. This time, I was at the center table. I wore a sleek, tailored black dress, simple, sharp, my hair in soft waves, no flashy diamonds, just Tom's wedding band strung on a delicate gold chain around my neck. As guests filtered in, I saw them glance, whisper, glance again. Half of them had heard the gossip, the battle, the will, the headlines. The rest just knew the widow had somehow inherited it all. The Riveras arrived late, of course. Gloria walked in with her chin high, dripping in resentment and pearls. Dominic came with his third wife. Renee arrived alone. They didn't come to talk. They came to watch. Midway through dinner, the host tapped the mic. And now please welcome the new face of Rivera Enterprises, Elena Rivera. I stood slowly, the lights warming my skin as I approached the podium. I wasn't nervous, not because I felt comfortable, but because I had nothing left to prove. My husband, I began, used to say that legacy is not what you build, but what you leave standing. The room quieted. When Tom passed, people assumed I'd fall apart, that I'd disappear, that I was just a widow. My eyes drifted toward the Rivera table. Dominic's jaw was tight. Gloria avoided my gaze. I am a widow, I said, but I am also a steward of something greater than wealth. I'm here because someone I loved believed I was worthy of carrying forward everything he built, not because I had his name, but because I had his trust. There was a long pause, then the room erupted in applause. Not polite, not hesitant, earned, and the Riveras? Their smirks had vanished long ago. They couldn't clap, because deep down they finally understood. He hadn't just left me the company, he left me above them. A week after the gala, I found a small package wedged between old tax documents in the study, an envelope addressed to me in Tom's handwriting. No postage, no seal, just my name. I sat down on the edge of our bed and opened it carefully, the way you open something sacred. Inside were 3 folded letters, one marked for now, another for later, and the third simply for when they turn on you. I laughed, a bitter little sound. It was exactly like Tom to prepare for something no one else would think of, but everyone would eventually face. I opened the one marked for now. Elena, if you're reading this, then the will has been read, and I know exactly what they said to you. I know how they looked at you. I know the little ways they tried to shrink you, even while the ink was drying. But you are not small. You never were. I didn't leave you everything to spite them. I left it to you because you were the only one who ever saw what I was trying to build. They built their lives around legacy. You built yours around love. One is hollow. The other will outlast all of them. And if you ever forget that, read this again. I read that letter twice, 3 times. Then I folded it back up and put it in my top drawer beneath my favorite scarf. I didn't open the second one, not yet. I knew I'd need it one day, but today wasn't it. But I did open the third. For when they turn on you. It began with a line that broke something loose inside me. They will try to punish you for the power I gave you. Don't let them convince you it was unearned. And he was right. Again, because Dominic wasn't done. That same afternoon, I got a call from our corporate legal counsel. Apparently, Dominic had been quietly approaching several minor shareholders, trying to orchestrate a buyout to restore Rivera Enterprises to family control. Desperate, predictable, dangerous. I didn't panic. Instead, I scheduled a private shareholders meeting. Not public, not loud, just real. I came in with 3 things: a forensic audit, a 5-year expansion plan based on Tom's old framework, and a roster of new partnerships I'd been quietly developing. I showed them facts, not sentiment, profits, innovation, stability. And then I said, calmly and without drama, I am not Rivera by blood, but I am Rivera by choice. I'm the reason the name hasn't been dragged through court, through debt, through disgrace. I paused and let that sit. If you choose to believe Dominic can lead this company better than I can, then by all means, vote your shares. But you'll be voting against what's working, not what's broken. The room was silent. The vote wasn't even close. I held my position by a landslide. That night, I poured myself a glass of scotch, Tom's favorite, and stood out on the balcony overlooking the city skyline. The wind was cool, the stars were out. I didn't feel triumphant, I felt clear. Dominic didn't speak to me after that. Renee sent a single text. You never belonged. You just got lucky. I didn't reply, because luck didn't build this. Tom and I did. Quietly, fully, together. And in the end, they weren't just wrong about me. They were wrong about him. He hadn't left them out. He'd seen them for who they really were and made his choice. And his choice was me. By the time the fiscal year closed, Rivera Enterprises had posted its strongest quarter in 5 years. It wasn't just profit margins, it was the shift in energy. Morale was up. Employee turnover was down. Departments were collaborating in ways they never had under the old guard. The board meetings grew quieter, less combative. No more whispers of just a widow behind my back. Now people leaned in when I spoke. Respect wasn't handed to me, it was built. One decision, one fire put out, one truth faced at a time. Still, not everything could be fixed with spreadsheets and quarterly reports. Tom's absence hung heavy, especially in the quiet moments. Like walking into the penthouse suite and hearing my own heels echo, or reaching across the bed out of habit and finding only cool sheets. Some nights I still woke up expecting his hand to reach for mine in the dark. That's when I opened the second letter. For later. You made it this far, Elena. I knew you would, but I also know how lonely it gets once you stop proving people wrong and start building something for yourself. There's going to be a day, probably soon, when you wonder if it's worth it. If fighting this hard, staying this visible, staying this strong is worth it. I can't be there to say yes out loud, but I'll say it here. Yes, it is. Because you're not just continuing what I started. You're rewriting what it means to carry my name, and someday when someone else walks into that office with your last name, not Rivera by blood but by impact, they'll thank you. Let them remember the woman who didn't shrink when they tried to make her small. Let them remember you. You were never just a widow. You were my beginning and my legacy. I cried. Harder than I had since the day he died, not from grief, but from finally understanding why he made the choices he did. He hadn't left me everything out of guilt or protection. He left it to me because I saw him, and he wanted to make sure the world finally saw me too. That weekend, I stood in front of the company's new headquarters, a modern, eco-efficient building Tom had once dreamed of. Now, it bore a new name across the front in clean, backlit lettering, the Rivera Foundation and Enterprises in honor of Thomas and Elena Rivera. When the sign was unveiled, there were reporters, executives, community leaders, employees with tears in their eyes, and a few faces I hadn't expected. Former interns, small-town entrepreneurs Tom once mentored, people he'd quietly supported, never asking for anything in return. I took the mic. Legacy isn't about what you take with you, I said. It's about what you leave behind for others to rise with. Tom knew that, and now it's time the world knew it too. They clapped, loudly, not just for him, for me too. Even Gloria came, though she stayed at the edge of the crowd. She didn't speak to me, but when I passed her, I saw her mouth the words "thank you." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was enough. Back in the boardroom the next Monday, someone asked if I'd be taking a permanent CEO title. I smiled. No, I said, I'm not interested in titles. I'm interested in impact. They nodded. No one questioned it. I had already made it clear. I didn't need to sit on a pedestal to lead. I was the woman who showed up, even when they told her she didn't belong. The one who turned just a widow into the woman who rebuilt the Rivera legacy with her own 2 hands. And I wasn't done yet. Spring arrived slowly that year, the kind of spring where the world seemed to thaw along with me. The weight on my chest didn't disappear, but it softened. I could breathe again without feeling like I was carrying the whole of Tom's name on my shoulders. But I wasn't finished. Not until the last loose end was tied. One morning, I received an invitation in the mail. Thick cardstock, gold lettering, no return address, but I didn't need one. In honor of the Rivera legacy, a private family tribute luncheon, Gloria. There was no apology enclosed, no handwritten note. Just the time, date, and location. Tom's childhood estate where they'd held every family event since the 1960s. I almost threw it away, but something inside me, older than grief, deeper than pride, told me to go. Not for them, for me. The Rivera estate was just as I remembered it. White pillars, trimmed hedges, the scent of lemon wax, and control. The house stood like it always had, proud, polished, untouched by time. But the people inside? They were different, or maybe I was. I walked in wearing a soft navy blue suit, Tom's favorite color. No jewelry except my wedding ring still strung around my neck. Heads turned, conversations paused. Eyes tracked me, as if I were an echo they hadn't prepared to face again. Dominic stood in the corner, drink in hand, expression unreadable. Renee offered a shallow smile, then looked away. Gloria approached, slowly. No pearls this time, just a pale pink blouse and trembling hands that tried not to show it. "Elena," she said softly, "thank you for coming." I nodded, waiting. She looked at me the way someone looks at a closed door they're afraid to open. "I wanted to say something about the will, about Tom." I raised my chin slightly. "You mean about how he chose me instead of you all?" Her mouth opened, then closed, and that was all I needed to see. "I'm not here for a performance," I said. "I'm here to say goodbye to this version of us, the one where you got to decide my worth. That chapter's closed." Gloria's eyes glistened, but she didn't fight back. "He really did love you," she whispered, "more than any of us ever understood." I nodded. "I know." I turned away and stepped into the garden, Tom's favorite place on the estate. He used to sit by the old fountain with a sketch pad or a notebook, dreaming about the future. And there, tucked under the stone bench, was something new, a plaque. Brass, freshly mounted. "In loving memory of Thomas Rivera, a man who believed in building, not controlling." Dedicated by Elena. They hadn't added it. I had. And it would stay long after their bitterness faded. That night, I returned home and stood in the bedroom doorway for a long time. The apartment was still, peaceful, mine. I finally took Tom's wedding band off the chain and placed it in the small wooden box he used to keep his watch in. It didn't feel like letting go. It felt like finally putting something where it belonged. Because I wasn't holding on out of pain anymore. I was holding on out of honor, not just to the man I loved, but to the woman I had become because of that love. Months later, Rivera Enterprises launched its first women-led mentorship program under the new Rivera Initiative. Applications flooded in. Young women in tech, finance, education, even social work. The first round of selected mentees sent handwritten letters. One said, "Thank you for reminding the world that widows can lead. That grief doesn't mean weakness, and that love can be a legacy too." I smiled, folded it neatly, and placed it next to Tom's letters in the drawer. And that's where it all lived now. Grief, power, growth, memory, but above all, victory. Not loud, not vengeful, just earned. Because when they said, "You're just a widow," they never imagined that I'd be the one standing at the end, with the house, the name, the future, and the final word.